We're doing 81 to 88. Man, too many issues this stream. Okay, let's get started now.
Gath, a psalm of Asaph.
Sing aloud to God our strength. Make a joyful shout to the God of Jacob. Raise a song and strike the timbrel, the
It's
pleasant
awkward
harp
'cause
with the lute.
I'm working off a laptop,
Blow
so I
the
don't have
trumpet
another
at the
screen
time of the
to
new
see
moon,
the
at the full
software.
moon,
I'm
on
just
our
seeing
solemn feast day.
the text.
For this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. This he established in Joseph as a testimony when he went throughout the land of Egypt, where I heard a language I did not understand. I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the baskets. You called in trouble, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah.
I'm gonna go back a little bit. What caught my attention was where I heard a language I didn't understand, right? This he established in Joseph, a testimony when he went throughout the land of Egypt, where I heard a language I did not understand. So is that I, Joseph? I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the baskets. You called in trouble, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you in the waters of Meribah. I'm assuming that he's talking about Joseph. Let me look up a commentary. Is that big enough? I can make it a little bit bigger. I removed his shoulders. Okay, but before we get into his, here, this he established in Joseph as a testimony, right? When he went throughout the land of Israel, Asaph thought of the great assembly of God's people as they came together to leave their slavery in Egypt. They gathered together for the initial deliverance, and it became the basis for their future assemblies and feasts. I heard a language I didn't understand, the Egyptian language, which at first was very ungrateful and unknown to the Israelites. Genesis 42:23. Oh, did that say something about? But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for they spoke to them through an interpreter. And probably continued so for some considerable time, because they were much separated, both in place and conversation, from the Egyptians, through Joseph's pious and prudent design. So are we talking about all of Israel in the time of in the time after Joseph, not just Joseph in this case? Let's go back to the text. Sing aloud to God our strength. Make a joyful shout to the God of Jacob. Raise a song and strike the timbrel, the pleasant harp with the lute. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast day. For this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. This he established in Joseph as a testimony when he went through the land of Egypt. Well, it's a capital H, so it's talking about God, not Joseph, where I heard a language I did not understand. And who's the I here? It can't be Asaph, where I heard a language I did not understand. Or is he talking about in first person to the Israelites back then? I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the baskets. So now his is, it can't be talking about God here. You called in trouble and I delivered you. So this I is in first person. He switched. So this I has to be God, I'm assuming now, right? I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you in the waters of Meribah. So when he went throughout the land of Egypt, where I heard a language I did not understand, I removed his shoulder from the burden. You see where I'm getting confused here? Because it makes sense that if this H was lowercase, this he established in Joseph as a testimony when he went through the land of Egypt. Right? If this is the same he, if Joseph and this he were the same. Because God going through the land of Egypt, I guess you could say, but God should have been in the land of Egypt because God's everywhere. So what do you mean God went throughout the land of Egypt? Where I heard a language I did not understand. And who is the I? Because in verse 6, starting at verse 6, it sounds like the I is talking about God. So why would God hear a language he did not understand? Joseph didn't hear a language. Joseph probably heard a language he didn't understand. And if we're talking about Israel, the people of Israel on a whole, they didn't hear a language. They heard a language they didn't understand. But that's why this is a bit confusing. Let's look up at a different commentary and see. What was this? 81. We want before 81.7. I'll just look at this and then go back. Start at 81.5. Let's make this bigger. Okay, so this he ordained in Joseph for testimony. Let's switch to this he ordained in Joseph for a testimony. That is, this law concerning the blowing of trumpets on the new moon and the keeping of the solemn feast at the full moon was made to be observed by all Israel, who are meant by Joseph. Okay, so Joseph, that's the first time I've ever heard that, where Israel is referred to as Joseph. Right? Right in the previous sentence, they're referring to Israel as Jacob because Jacob is Israel. And all the descendants of Israel are from Jacob. But all the descendants of Israel are not just from Joseph. This he established in Joseph as a testimony. So when it said in Joseph, I was thinking maybe the tribe of Joseph, so the area, but it can't be just that because it was not just established in that one sector. It's for all of Israel. Because it's a law of the God of Jacob. This he established in Joseph as a testimony. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast day. Or did he tell Joseph about this and then Joseph really instigated? Like he established it in Joseph and Joseph was the one that started this? I don't think so, though. Let's see, continue to read what this commentary is saying. Who are meant by Joseph for a testimony of God's goodwill to them and of their duty and obedience to him. I'm still not 100% about that. That's sort of odd that they use Joseph to refer to all of Israel when Joseph is just one tribe of Israel. When he went out throughout the land of Egypt or over it, which some understand of Joseph, who is said to go over all the land of Egypt to gather in provision against the 7 years of famine. Okay, so this commentary is saying that the he here is Joseph. So this he in whatever translation they were looking at for their commentary, this he wouldn't have been capitalized. And that makes more sense in the way this reads, because it does flow if you read it. This he established in Joseph as a testimony when he went through the land of Egypt. Right? If he was the same person, it flows. But it doesn't make sense. Why would he, God, when God went throughout the land of Egypt? There's no when for God going throughout the land of Egypt. God is everywhere, you know? So it makes sense. It would make more sense if this he was Joseph. And that would mean that this H shouldn't be capitalized. So it would be interesting to find out why they decided to capitalize this H, because was there, I don't know how the Hebrew language works. Was there any reference to God in that he, in the Hebrew? I'm not sure. And if there wasn't, why did they decide to make that interpretation? Let's continue with this commentary. So with this commentary is thinking that this he, see they had the lowercase he, is talking about Joseph, where I heard a language that I did not understood. Here the prophet represents the people of Israel in Egypt through the Septuagint, Vulgate, Latin, Syriac, and Arabic versions. Read, he heard and he understood not. So multitude of other translations read it saying he heard and he didn't understand. That makes a whole lot more sense, because you're just talking about in the same sentence that he went throughout the land of Egypt. And then why would you switch to where I heard a language I didn't understand? It flows a whole lot better if it's when he went throughout the land of Egypt, where he heard a language he did not understand, because he's going throughout Egypt and he didn't understand the language. So that makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense if we're actually referring to Joseph, and that's who this he was. Then if we were talking about all of Israel switching from Joseph to God, or switching from God to all of Israel, that makes it confusing, and that doesn't really flow. So man, that's why I wish I knew Hebrew so I can really understand the meaning. But then it goes into quotations, right? And it says, I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were freed from the baskets. You called in trouble, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. I don't know about I tested you at the waters of Meribah, but that will be a huge clue and pinpointing what this is talking about. But I'm just going off of what I know from face value here, talking about I freed you from the baskets. I removed his shoulder from the burden. God did remove burden from Joseph's shoulder, right? He was a slave, and then he got promoted. He was blessed, and God removed that burden, that physical burden from him. But I tested you at the waters of Meribah. So who is this I? I'm assuming God. And who did he test at the waters of Meribah? If it's Joseph, then that makes complete sense. So which verse was that? 7. I proved thee at the waters of Meribah, by withholding water from them to try them, and see whether they would behave patiently and put their trust and confidence in the Lord. So now they're talking about all of Israel, I'm assuming. Thou calledst in trouble, and I delivered thee. That is when Israel were in trouble in Egypt, and the Targum adds, they cried unto the Lord in their distress. He heard them and answered them and sent to them a deliverer and brought them out of all their troubles. Okay, so now we're talking about the Israelites, which now I'm getting why there's switching back and forth in these versions because we're not 100% sure, it looks like. So this he established in Joseph as a testimony. So let's say Joseph is talking about Israel. When he went throughout the land of Egypt, where I heard a language I didn't understand. If we're talking about all of Israel, maybe Joseph is the he here in the second line, and we're talking about all of Israel for this he. And it's the Israelites in Egypt where they didn't understand the language. And so God removed his burden, his shoulder from the burden. So all of Israel, but it's odd again, right? Why are we switching from I to his, and he to I, and Joseph to he and I? If we're talking about all of Israel, it's confusing. Let me know how would you guys interpret this, because from the two commentaries I looked at, we have two different interpretations. Let's see how this commentary interpreted the rest. When he went throughout the land of Egypt, Asaph thought of the great assembly of God's people as they came together to leave their slavery in Egypt. So they're thinking that he is all of Egypt. And did they say anything about Joseph in this? Looks like they didn't. So I'm assuming that Joseph is all of Israel as well. I removed his shoulder from the burden. In the first part of the psalm, a call went to God's people to gather, suggested by their first gathering as people, as slaves in Egypt. Now God speaks to his gathered people. Okay, so we're going with, this commentary is also, this part is going with all of Israel. And honestly, all of Israel makes sense because, I guess you could use Joseph as an example. But, I didn't look at the trusted at the waters of Meribah. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. God not only delivered Israel, but he also trained them. And the testing at Meribah was an example of this. At Meribah, God miraculously provided water for a complaining and unbelieving Israel. Okay, so boom, 100% we're talking about Israel. The story of Israel is only our own history in another shape. God has heard us, delivered us, liberated us, and too often our unbelief makes the wretched return of mistrust, murmuring, and rebellion. And I'm going to assume this commentary is talking about them, right? Talking about Israel. Okay, so we are 100% talking about Israel here. This I is God. That means this his is Israel. When I heard a language I did not understand, that means this I has to be Israel. When he went throughout the land of Egypt, same sentence, this he is also Israel. Thus, he established in Joseph as a testimony. He is God. Joseph's got to be Israel. So I feel like this translation has got it wrong. The way that makes sense would be that this he, God, established in Joseph, Israel, as a testimony when he, Israel, went throughout the land of Egypt, where he, this I should be he, learned the language he did not understand. Okay? That's how that sentence, I think, should go, because that's what makes sense. Based off the two commentaries I'm reading, based off of just the text, it looks like that's what makes sense. And then it goes into 6. I removed his shoulder from the burden. I is God. His would be Israel. Just like over here. Should have been Israel. Just like this should have been he. Just should have been he. You called in trouble, and I, God, delivered you, Israel. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Okay, so that's allowing things to flow a whole lot better. What do you guys think about that? That's interesting. Why a lot of, like, what did it say? The Septuagint. I forgot which commentary that was, but it looks like many translations have he here. So that's on that this has I. That threw things. That was just one of the things that threw the translation off.
The baskets. You called in trouble, and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Hear, O my people, and I will admonish you. O Israel, if you will listen to me, there shall be no foreign god among you, nor shall you worship any foreign god. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not heed my voice, and Israel would have none of me.
So this is further backing the idea that we were talking about Israel, right? Not Joseph, Israel.
So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. Oh, that my people would listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. I would soon subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord would pretend submission to him, but their fate would endure forever. He would have fed them also with the finest of wheat, and with honey from the rock, I would have satisfied you.
Here's an interesting point also. This is a psalm of Asaph to be played or to be sung with the accompaniment of the instrument of Gath. It was given to the chief musician, right? So this was a song to be sung. It was written by a musician, right? It has verses and everything. But he's quoting God, right? So if it is written by Asaph, that means God didn't really say this. So, but he's speaking as God in first person. So he is writing for God like you would write for a character. What do you think about that? Do you think that's blasphemous? I mean, it's coming from a good place, right? But he is writing for God. So that's just interesting to note, right? He's writing for God. He's writing what he thinks God would say, like a character in a book. That's interesting. I mean, it's probably nothing wrong with it because it's coming from a good place, and it's just a song, you know. He's not trying to say that, you know, this is what God said. No, he's just writing in first person. But yeah, it's just interesting to point out. What do you guys think about that? You know, it's just interesting because I could see how there could that could spark a debate. You know, if we should speak for God, like you can go down a rabbit hole there, right? Is Asaph speaking for God? Is he putting words in God's mouth? You know, because God didn't really say this. So I could see like how this could spark a debate, but yeah. All right, let's jump into 82.
Psalm 82, a psalm of Asaph.
Another of Asaph.
God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. How long will you judge unjustly?
That's interesting. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. Who is the mighty? Mighty men. He judges among the gods. So are we putting some credence to the idea of gods? Because we know at a time when Israel believed in God, but they also thought, and so did everybody else, they thought that God was among all the other gods. So there were all these other gods, all these other nations were praying to their gods, and God was the greatest one among them, right? I'm sure the other nations probably didn't think that God was the greatest one among them. They probably thought their gods were the greatest. But Israel, they mixed things up. They had shrines and altars in their house of other gods. They had a priest that was a Levite who so they covered all the grounds, right? They covered the God of Jacob, the God of Israel, and then they had the other gods all in their house, trying to cover all the grounds, make sure they're blessed from every direction, right? So there was a time when God, the true God, was looked at as just one of the other gods, right? This was the God of Jacob, the God of Israel. Baal was the God of those people, Molech was the God of those people. But here, Asaph is saying he judges among the gods. So is he standing among the gods and judging, or is he judging those gods? And by judging those gods or standing among those gods and judging, does that mean those gods are actually there? Or is this just because this is a psalm and he's being colorful with his vocabulary? Because the next line it says, how long will you judge unjustly? So he is calling out God here and show partiality to the wicked. So he is, literally calling out God. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. So first we got to figure out who this mighty is. Let's look this up. Psalms 82. Sorry, I'm typing with one hand. Where is that? Enduring. What website was that? I like how that website is laid out. And was it Enduring Word? Yeah. So God stands in the congregation of the mighty. Asaph gives us the picture of God in the midst of the mighty, standing in authority. Standeth as a judge diligently to observe all that is said or done there, and to give sentence accordingly. The judge sits when he heareth causes, but standeth up when he giveth sentence. But then again, we're still, who's the mighty here? God is standing, it gives us a picture that God is standing in the midst of the mighty. So God is one among the mighty. Then who are the other, who are the others? That is important because the next sentence is he judges among the gods. God standing in the midst of these mighty ones is to bring judgment among them. But if he's standing amongst them, bringing judgment to them, that means there is some credence to them, which there is not. They're not real. The word gods here is Elohim, the plural for the generic word of God in Hebrew. So Elohim is the generic word for God in Hebrew. The idea of God judging gods has led to several suggestions regarding the identity of these Elohim, these gods. Elohim is often used to describe the true God, Yahweh. This got me thinking here regarding the identity of these Elohim, these gods, because again, it can fall back to Genesis 6, right? People believe that in Genesis 6, the fallen angels, right? Those fallen angels, if they're still around, could those be these gods? Gods. The Elohim, the plural of the generic word for God, is in Hebrew. The idea of God judging gods has led to several suggestions regarding the identity of these Elohim, these gods. Elohim is often used to describe the true God, Yahweh. It is the plural to describe both the majesty of his person and to be a hint of the triune nature of God, being one God in three persons. Right? Because if you were a Muslim and you're reading Elohim, or you're a Jew and you're reading Elohim, you'd be confused, I would imagine. Like, why is it plural? You know? And that makes sense with the Trinity, because you have 1 and 3. 1 and 3 is a very confusing subject. We can get into that later on. But that lends itself to the idea of Elohim, the plural. So Elohim is sometimes used as a plural of pagan deities, the false gods of the nations. So that's interesting how the word Elohim can be used as God, the true God Yahweh, and the plural of false pagan deities. Because evidently Elohim is just the generic word for God in Hebrew. So that's interesting. Elohim is sometimes used in reference to angelic beings, and this again could lend itself to the idea of the fallen angels, right? I've heard theories like, I don't know much about this stuff, but the Anunnaki or something like that, those could be like the fallen angels. And I've heard theories like the fallen angels could have inspired these other pagan practices, which lends itself to this idea that those are who these people are praying to. All these gods were actually fallen angels, and or something to that effect. And that's why God is so upset by people worshiping them, right? Because they're literally like worshiping demons, you know? Elohim, or is a fallen angel a demon? I don't know if that counts. But you get what I'm saying, right? Elohim is best taken as a reference to human judges. Elohim here is best taken as a reference to human judges who stand in the place of God in their ability to determine the fate of others. Gathered around him is an assembly of judges who are called Elohim because they are his delegates. They administer his will. They are his executive agents. But he's judging them. He's judging them. Unless we're talking about two separate groups of people now. The judges and magistrates are compared in this psalm to God because they exercise power. They exercise something of his power in the right ordering of human society. Let's go back to the text. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. So let's say mighty is human. He judges among the gods. So that means the gods are referring to human judges? How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? I think, just from reading this again, the wicked are people who follow pagan ideologies. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. I don't get that part. He judges among the gods, the pagan gods. How long will you judge unjustly? And show partiality to the wicked? So Asaph is angry at God. He is like, why are you judging why are you judging unjustly, showing partiality to the wicked? He's showing partiality to the wicked because he's standing among the gods of the wicked. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. But I understand the flow here. If he's standing among pagan gods, judging unjustly, that makes sense. Showing partiality to the wicked, that makes sense. But I don't understand why Asaph would call them mighty. You know? That doesn't make sense. What do you guys think about that? This is really interesting. We can look at a different commentary. Workingpreacher.org. What is this? The gods may be crazy, but they are definitely unjust. The gods stand and judges in the assembly of the gods. God stands and judges in the assembly of the gods. So this guy does believe that he's talking about gods. The gods are confronted over their injustice. So he judges among the gods. How long will he judge the unjustly? God, verse 2-4. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? The gods are confronted over their injustice. Okay. So, the question here being asked, according to that commentary, is God is asking this question. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. So God is in the congregation of all these other gods. And he's looking at these other gods and he's saying to them, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? I don't know about that. Let's keep reading first and then see if we get any more context.
How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. I said, you are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High.
What?
But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations.
All right, this is confusing me even more. Okay, so defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and needy, free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know nor they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. So up to that point, I'm like, okay, this can't be God speaking to the other gods, you know? That can't be the case. Because why would they free them from the hand of the wicked? They are the wicked, you know? But then he says, you are the gods. All of you are children of the Most High. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God. Oh, period. End quotes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations. This is confusing. First, the psalm asserts authority of God over every supernatural power. A major interpretive crux of Psalm 82 has been the identity of the gods. In verse 1, a literal translation from the Hebrew Elohim, this word, of course, can be taken in the singular God, as in the first line of the psalm, or the plural gods, as the second line of the psalm. Over 2,000 years of biblical interpretation have witnessed at least 4 major understandings of the term. Rabbinic interpretation tended Come on, man. Camera died. I'm thinking, because we got to go up till 88, and this we have a lot more to unpack in 82. And in order to get my other camera set up, I'm going to have to install a whole other software because I'm on a new computer. This is a horrible way to end. Absolutely horrible way to end. But but I think we're going to have to end right here. And we'll pick up tomorrow with 82. So we only finished 81, partially of 82, but we're going to pick up tomorrow at 82. And we crashed and burned here at the end, but it got interesting. It did get interesting. So, yeah, apologize for that, for the camera dying. But, yeah, it's going to take a while. I got to install a whole other software to get the other camera set up. But hope you enjoyed this reading so far. I found it incredibly interesting. Hope you guys just found it interesting too. I know you're looking at a bunch of colored lines on the screen right now. But hope you found it interesting. And yeah, we'll continue looking into chapter 82 tomorrow. And we'll continue on from there. Hopefully we all right. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.